Hey everybody, this is Chuck here for deucescrack.com, coming at you with some live Omaha 8 or better action here on the Bovada Network. We've got a change of pace from some previous episodes. This week I've got 2 tables up. In general, I usually try to focus on one table at when I'm making a video, just so I can focus more on my opponent's play and basically some of the mistakes my opponents may be making. And sometimes like scenarios like this where maybe you have 2 semi-interesting hands you want to talk about. But this week, you've noticed I got a HUD up, so I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the advantages and disadvantages of a HUD. And right now, we are running poorly on the right table. I don't think I want to be betting there. On the left, when we flop this 3-4-5 to go with the ace-2-6 against an aggressive button, I like check raising the flop for value. If we're betting on the right here, it's really just a stone cold bluff. I don't think we're getting this player off any 2-card low combo when the 2 comes in on the river. And we just call here and just check call the river. If we get quartered, that's pretty unfortunate. I don't see that happening all too often. Wow. So the villain's play there really only makes sense if they can precisely put us on a naked low to try to maybe make their high worth it by getting this player off of an ace, but it seems like a pretty thin plan. We are dealing with some aggressive button opens today, which is exciting for us because it puts me in some tougher spots in the blinds, which should yield some more beneficial educational content to you, the viewer. Hopefully you have been enjoying the 08 games this week. I have been jumping in mercilessly and starting games in preparation of some more heads-up content. So the weird guy who's been playing until the table fills up and then leaving, that's me. The games do seem to have been going quite often lately. As we see, we do have a full ring game. This is actually an AM session. Pardon my AM sounding voice. It's actually just me getting over illness. It is rather cold here in New York. So one big advantage, obviously, to the HUD is just like in any other game, being able to play multiple tables with information being gathered for you already. I absolutely want to make sure to not use just my HUD for my reads, because I do think if you watch enough of my videos, you see there's a lot you can pick up from just paying attention to showdowns and seeing the way other players play. I've marked this player 2 here with green, just signifying like for me green is easy, like playing straightforward ABC. It doesn't mean they're even a bad player. They could be the best player in the game, but when this player bets, they've got the goods, right? When this player leads multi-way into 4 players. And from what I've seen, that's the case thus far. Obviously, these HUDs, these stats don't matter for that at all. Like we see a high aggression frequency in VPIP and PFR, but I just really saw this player lead with the nuts like several times. And it just, that turn raise there, when I see red, just caution, right? This is the type of player I'm going to want to be cautious against out of position. I'm not going to be check raising and betting super wide. Without a game plan, right? I'm not saying I'm never going to try to bluff this player, but and there's really not much to take away from these stats with that. As much as a HUD is great, what a HUD is super excellent for in 08. This is where you'll make your money back immediately on the HUD purchase, is when you can just see these red flag numbers. When I see a PFR of 3, right? 29 hands. When I see a player limp in early position and they are an 80/10 or they are a 10/8, right? When I see a super tight player limp in early position, we don't know exactly what 4 cards they have, but we know pretty much in the neighborhood of what 4 cards they have. And it really is like so beneficial. Like people are actually turning their hands semi-face up in those situations. You can just play so easily post flop, right? Right, without caution, you can attack a board like 9-9-5, because there should be no 9x in that villain's range unless they flop quads or something, right? Even then, I guess there could be some, but we're more focused. We're not really focused on the 5% of the time that their ace 2-3 Badugi contained a 9. We're more focused on the 95% of the time it contained another card, right? So that's one of the things. It just makes situations, especially like this, when I want to throw a full ring game in. Because in general, a good full ring game online, just playing ABC poker is going to be we get to test our green flag here. We got our hero of the day check raised this turn card. If it's complete airball or something, no, it's ace 5-6. We can just take that off right away, right? But again, action goes in, and there were nuts. I will say one of the funnier things about an anonymous network and playing, 6-max full ring games, especially in an 08 game where you can really play with some players that seemingly have never played. That's how strangely they'll play, and then some players that are obviously more skilled and have been playing for some time. There's no identifier. You have to kind of figure it out, as opposed to if I was playing on PokerStars or Full Tilt or something. Oh, there's such and such. There's such and such. Never seen this name before. This isn't going to end well for him or her, right? Just a humorous side note as I fold a few hands here. We are actually full on both tables, so should have plenty of time to talk about all of our decisions and pay close attention to all of our opponents. It's when the game gets shorthanded is I think when you can kind of miss things, especially when a game is like heads up or 3-handed versus a full ring game. In that situation, I might argue it might be better for me to just leave the full ring game if the 3-handed game is taking up that much of my attention and this game is like breaking up, right? If this is like 6 going down to 2 or 3, because I don't know, I don't want to be the disinterested player in that situation, right? The one who's not really paying attention to what's going on. Hopefully get a free look with our 2 wheels in the big blind. This is certainly not a hand worth defending. We do see a raise on the button from a suspected reasonable player and a limp from a suspected reasonable player. Again, we would expect this to be some sort of decent low combo, right? Maybe a high only type hand. That's the kind of stuff we're limping. We'd expect some action here. And this we would expect to actually be some sort of premium hand juicing the pot, right? And now, when I'm looking at players and like essentially being judgmental, I'm looking for a situation where this player is building the pot with a hand that I don't think you want to be building the pot with. In other words, like raising here with king, 8-2 single suited. It's like, that's just bad. You want to play kings? I don't care. Like, you can convince me that kings are played correctly a certain way. Oh, we don't get to see. That's a bummer. But in that situation, obviously, our thoughts on this player potentially having some sort of reasonable low combo, essentially hold water, so to speak, because the board ran out, and this player leading that low draw. This player could have just had quads or ace king. Got a limp from this player here. I would raise this on the button if it folded to me. We do have 2 loose players, but let's just give it a go. I think this could potentially be a fold, or maybe just a limp. Maybe limping is better. I don't suspect to have much fold equity. I don't suspect this being a limp re-raising range much, but like, again, this is just a situation where I feel like this hand is profitable to voluntarily put money in the pot with, right? That's premise 1. Premise 2 is that this player is kind of turning their hand a little face up, which makes it easier as well. I flop okay. I'm going to go ahead and bet. This is interesting on the right here. We could probably just cold call. I don't think about this player. It's one of their first raises. I'm in the small blind. I mean, you could just fold. It's one of the worst ace 3s you could have, but I don't think calling can be that bad. So we're looking for a king on the turn. I wasn't expecting. I mean, I guess I can't say I wasn't expecting bet call. But I also think it's a pretty decent way to put some money in this pot and then play 2 more streets. Wow, ace 2, 6, 3. I missed the other player's hand they showed down with, so actually I'm going to load that up. Hopefully my voice, well, I get to audio edit myself here. Ace King 10 too, so. Just the goods. Everyone had the goods. This card is actually pretty good. And we're in a bit of a tough spot here, right? We've built a big pot. We've got what is potentially the best hand right now with a pair of kings. I think we can just fold, though. Both these players called. This player only has 650 left. I'm hoping that means they're a little more. No. You know, that's an argument against even bothering with a hand like that. But essentially, I don't know why I put an extra letter in there. On that board texture, it's not going to be 4 colors. Apologies to the purists. But when I get led into on the turn, it's not a great card for me. I do block King X, which is actually bad for me because it makes for less like King Queens that the villain could potentially be leading with. Not that there should be too many, but we have no low draw to go along with our hand. Like if there's a time to call with an 8 high flush draw, it's not when it's the only part of your hand that you're sticking with. As to pre-flop, again, I feel like putting money in with kings there is profitable. And when a player kind of turns their hand face up-ish as something that actually hits a board more like this, versus, if the turn was 2 of diamonds and they led, I would be like, how is that possible, right? I'm expecting anything like a decent low and stuff like that. And it was only an 8 high flush draw. Like I think the king high flush draw I would probably call if I had kings in the king high flush draw, because then maybe my second king is good, and more importantly, 4 ways my king high flush draw might be better. You're not expecting the player with next to no money left to suddenly quit on the rest of the pot. And to 75, 25. I mean, again, it's 4 hands, so who cares? But seeing the HUD, man, I'm not. I hope I don't sound like I'm trying to be a commercial. I just feel like a lot of players, most of us are going to be using HUDs when we play. So for me to not fire one up and kind of talk about when I look at it and what it's valuable for, but we can just move on from that point from now on. Get raised on the turn here. I'm actually going to go ahead and lead this river card. I think the villain's turn raising range likely consists of a lot of like 2-pair combos, maybe some hands like that, but more like king jacks, king eights, etc. And I want those to call me on the river because I scoop those hands, right? I have I have a flush and I have a low. I am bet calling. I'm not folding. So that's unfortunate, but in that situation, I think that we're going to bet that river and get called and chop some high percentage of the time. I mean, some non-zero percentage of the time. We're also going to bet that river and scoop a decent percentage of the time. And I think when we bet and call a raise, we chop a decent percentage of the time then as well. And I also don't think we're bet calling very often. I know it's a lot of vague frequencies, but hopefully that's clear. If not, just feel free to post. But yeah. In general, I prefer shorthanded to full ring. You're just going to see more reasonable hands at showdown, and there's just less opportunity for someone to spew. And honestly, the loose aggressive players that want to be the action players in the game are typically more drawn to the shorthanded games, which is what I like. People that build big pots when they don't know that they're not supposed to be, that's super profitable for us. So big reason I'm a big fan. Wow. Ambitious flop peeling. So this player opened under the gun. I mean, ace, queen, 10, 8 double suited. I'm not going to blame anyone for a double suited open with that strong on the high end. And I guess peeling the flop once against this character seemed reasonable. So even though these hands may be playable for a steal on the button, we're relying on a decent amount of fold equity when we're playing these hands for late position, and it's just not even worth considering from early position in these games. especially that we've seen, some raising behind us. Like, you have to think of the post flop scenario that each of these hands is going to create, and especially a hand like this. Like, yeah, there's an ace 10-8 flop that we would love to jam. Like, that's great. That's a great board texture, and it's like, all right, it's got to be rainbow or it's got to be spades, and if it's spades, we have blockers. And yeah, 08 is alive and well. Look at this. Games are going. No playable holdings for us, however, even with the limps. I don't think you'd have to make this 3 a Broadway card, and then I'm only limping along if both these players to my right had limped as well. So it's almost like when I'm marking a player, something along these lines, it's like, yes, you can bet fold, and this is no, you cannot bet fold. Although, again, what we are, and this is what I'll be keeping in mind, is what we're basing this on is a turn raise that potentially had some value. In the same way, I'm trying to think if this hand was before, but in the same way, if you call, calling a flop bet means one thing, calling a turn bet means another, and then calling the river bet means an entirely different thing, right? A lot of players will shut down at that point. So that's something we're going to keep our eyes on. Played a little bit before and had some technical difficulties, so I'm trying to remember if that was one of those earlier hands. I probably will review one of those hands in a video at some point because that's some pretty interesting ones, but just all of it. Wow. Pardon the lull in the action. And I'd say as you accustom yourself to like using a HUD more, because you don't have to jump out and do any of this stuff right away, especially if you're only playing like 1 or 2 tables. You'll start to see hands like Jack 10, 7, 9 and be like, oh yeah, 49, 21. That's the type of stuff that player plays. And looking for a free look with our hand here on the right as well. We're running kind of cold pre-flop. These games are very active right now. So it's definitely in our best interest to be on the snug side, right? When players are going to be playing big pots, you need a hand that can make big hands more often. Doesn't mean I'm not going to be aggressive from the button, but when I have a short stack to my left here in particular, like this would be real reach steal. Not necessarily, right? If it's, king, if make this a king and make this a 4, like, oh, geez, that hand's like, yeah, we're going to raise that, right? King and 3 wheel cards, sure, with a suit. But when you have a player who's going to be calling you more often than not right behind you and essentially like committing themselves on the turn, you're going to end up in so many awkward situations. And essentially when players are willing to put more money in the pot with bad hands, we have no incentive really to play our bluffing hands. We have some incentive, but little incentive to play our like worst garbage hands, and a stronger incentive to play the rest. So it's almost like I'd like to forego this opportunity because, for another reason we could play a lot of those junky hands too is that these players are typically just check calling and check folding as opposed to check raising flops with their draws and things like that. Interesting here on the left, if it was like limped all this many ways, is this hand actually worth a value raise out of the blinds? I would answer yes, simply because I think if we were in a 6-way limped pot, the other ranges are so wide that relatively speaking, we're in very good shape and shouldn't expect too many folds. And something I do like about raising is like players just immediately put you on aces in that spot, which is pretty good. As is here with a raise, we just pretty trivial call. And pretty good flop for us to go ahead and check raise. Always an awkward spot when the villain 3-bets, because it's like really like what are you representing here? But we don't have much, if any, history with this player, so we're just gonna assume they have aces or ace 5. In all sincerity, on the flop. And on this river, though, now that I've rivered it all, I'm going to go ahead and bet, and I'll call a raise. That's the other part of it. So that's the other part of it, essentially, is what about when they just have complete air? Now, this looks suspect to me, $7 left, but I've got 29 hands at 45-3, and also I've got ace, king, 6, 7. So in all sincerity, on that other hand, I do like check raising the flop on a 9-5-5, but it is a spot where with that hand I have, I'm a little concerned because I don't want to fold, really, at any point. I don't want to bluff, essentially, try to be bluffing because I have a 2-pair that may be the best hand, but I also feel like this villain could potentially be spewing with hands that they would fold to us on later streets. In other words, there's a chance that villain had pocket jacks or something like that. And it's just, spewing their hand into oblivion. And I just say that from experience, from situations I've seen where it's a paired board with a flush draw, I check raise and players just go nuts on it. Just that kind of board texture. But my straightforward plan there is, listen, I flopped, the nut flush draw on a somewhat scary board that could have some immediate fold equity on. I'm going to go ahead and check raise. And we get 3-bet, we can obviously call. It's pretty easy. Turn one of the better cards for us. The question would have been, what do we do on a complete brick river? And I think at that point, that's when you could maybe default to that first point that I made, right? Oh, yeah, we're going to go ahead and just assume this player is going to be spewing. The problem is we have a 3 kicker with our ace. So we don't even beat ace, ace 8 or something there. So trying to think on that board texture. The problem is too, every club makes us a flush, every heart makes us a flush. So I call all the clubs. I can call all the big hearts, right? I can also just check call the big clubs because it just so happened I make the nut flush and the nut low. So I want to lead because I can bet call here, and I do not want it to check through. And I think if I check raise in that situation, the villain's only betting a full house, right? So something to that effect is what I believe is what I'm going to see. Man, we're just getting every single. I think this has been the whole session. I keep getting every single fringe hand. If this was a little bit better, I would just raise this here. I'm probably just supposed to fold. I say it like it's not my job to say what we're gonna do with the hands, but in a loose game, I want some wheel cards with it. It is double suited, but got some unpredictable characters here. I got an 87-60 in the small blind. I want a little bit more when I'm bringing my hand to the table, so to speak. Yeah, so that back to that hand, we can't leave out the what about the Jack of Spades river and all those other cards that could come in, right? I think that's when you really do just default, and I just look at the numbers here and now. I'm oh, listen, it's only 16 hands, but this player could potentially have anything. I don't know. Apologies. A little under the weather, as I mentioned. We do get 3-bet by our buddy here in seat 6. If I had any sort of low draw, even if it was 28, I might even just if this was ace queen 2-8, I'd probably check raise here. But as is, even his villain's naked lows are in not terrible shape, and we just have ace queen, so we're just going to call 3 streets. In other words, yeah, hands like this. And I think there's more value in me letting the villain barrel those hands 3 streets when they actually do mess, because they're going to. And to hedge against the times this player actually has something that beats me there. Because my hand, if I did have a low with it, I would go ahead and check raise, because this way the villain does have some sort of ace high only hand, which is potentially better than mine, or they make a boat. I can make a low. So in other words, I kind of had the worst ace queen you could have there, right? Just ace queen, which is a fine spot for me to call down. As I was going to say before I started coughing there, definitely want to see what that player had in that situation. I think it may be the correct play to fold if they do. Probably, yeah. This is an unfortunate spot. I called 4-bet, and I don't have the ace of hearts, which I don't like on the flop, but I'm just getting called. Everything missed here, so I think my best line is going to be to check to induce. I could potentially bet for value against like 7s, 8s, 10s, et cetera, but I am going to be bet calling there because I'm not too comfortable folding. And if that's the case, I think if I'm between bet call and check to induce, I actually prefer check to induce. And the villain actually just had a queen high flush draw, ace king queen 4. So turn the same low draw and everything. I got lucky on the 6 river to hold. Yeah, the other hand. I mean, at this point, I'm against this villain. I'll probably just buckle up, never folding. And I think this hand is fine to play against a player who's going to play close to 100 VPIP from the big blind. That's a big reason why I'm considering raising here. I think this player is kind of hampered by this player's willingness to play pots. And yes, this is a little beyond what a typical steal range would be, but I'm looking to play against this character. And we're in position. We would be raising this flop because last time we played a paired board against this player, there were some fireworks. Here we're getting a pretty good price, so we're going to go ahead and call. On the left, I'm going to go ahead and bet for value. I have a sinking suspicion, but I just didn't feel like getting check called by a flush. You can tell I've been value cutting myself a little bit lately. I still bet. I don't, you can have your doubts as long as you're still executing, right? And that's why you bet there and you say, hey, sometimes. On the right, not a great spot overall. Like, we're not super thrilled with 2-pair on this very coordinated board texture, but total pot $21, 2 backdoor flush draws. It's just calling my name. This was a speculative call pre-flop, but we were basically calling pre-flop pretty much closing the action, or maybe actually closing the action, and we're double suited. So if you're going to call with Jack 10 4 5, do it when you're double suited. And a good turn card for us, we can probably just go ahead and check raise here with 3 pairs and a club flush draw. And I'm going to go ahead and bet fold the river. Yeah, just aces. On the left here, I think it's a fine spot to check raise. I'm not expecting too many people to check their like ace jacks or like, king 9s or something in this game. This is also our buddy, so who cares, right? We're looking to check raise and build pots. Yeah, I mean, on the left there, we just had everything. So I might as well put some money in the pot. Happy to get away from this hand in the small blind, as much as I do like a free look every now and then. Yeah, apologies for my congestion. So yeah, on the right, there's going to be some tough turn cards to play, no matter what, right? And there's going to be some tough river cards to play, but that's why we're getting such a good price when we do everything we did there, right? We don't want to be calling, that hand in the small blind versus an under the gun open from the tightest player, but when we're in the big blind as a raise and several callers, like pretty slam dunk call there. And on the flop, when you've got top 2, it's just too strong of a hand to fold. Like, you can be check calling and check folding some turn cards. That's just part of poker, right? If it goes, we call and everyone's in the pot with us, and the turn is a 4 and it goes, bet raise, re-raise or something, we're probably up against exact 4-7 and exact, ace 2. So it's a bit of an over-exaggerated situation, but we do have 3 aces, which is more than you typically want. But I am hoping to knock some players out of the pot. On the left here, I do whiff with my overs and backdoor clubs, but I do have I think I have enough incentive to continuation bet here. And I'll just go ahead and call. And now we can check fold on the left. On the right, this went as poorly as possible, and we can fold. If this was an offsuit 6, maybe consider folding pre-flop, but I think looking to isolate here, we no glaring HUD information that says this is an easy spot to fold. I mean, the 5 hands, played every hand, I guess, maybe. But there were several in the blinds. I don't know. Maybe that's enough to, but I do have 3 of the aces, which blocks a lot of potential ace-x combos. And most people don't get the memo that 2 paired hands are pretty bad in 08. And this villain had king, queen, jack, 10. So can we really blame them? Favorable situation here on the left. We've got an overpair and a good low draw. I'll go ahead and raise this hand for value here on the right. Potentially take the button down, but if not, if this player is actually just going to play any 4 cards, this is great for me. Go ahead. Let's have a blast. $4 from this villain. We're really never folding. I don't think we have too much of an incentive to raise either. Well, when can you call when the worst river card ever comes in? Well, when the bet is half the actual size. As much as this is going to be a 7 at an abnormally high rate. It was 2 into 29, not 4 into 29. So I ended up raising here on the right for some value, and the pot got capped by our pal behind us. We have the nut diamond blocker, which is pretty relevant. And a pair and the nut low draw. I don't think we have any incentive to do anything besides call here. That's one of the worst turn cards. And the villain still leads. Well, we don't actually have a flush draw. There's a lot of players in this pot. I think we could probably just go ahead and fold that card. Don't know how much I like ace-7 for a low right there. I'm just trying to trap this player in the middle for bets. Well, no. No, I'm just... At that point, I was just hoping this player made some kind of maniacal fold for 50 cents. No, okay, just the nuts, which is good. We got away from our holding. That's a good hand. That's a real good hand. Let's see what this other player called down with, if that hand is up yet. Ace-jack 2-5. So they made the mistake we didn't on the turn for us, which was pairing the 2 and not folding their hand. Yeah. A lot of 2s blocked, but this player, I mean, for a player to cap and then lead twice when the board gets dicey, as much as like, well, it's just aces with a 4. It could also just be like ace-2-4. And simultaneously, like that's a situation where, if this player has been crazy, if they were playing more like player 6 was playing this whole session, then I probably would be a little more suspect and, maybe consider calling once more. It is a lot tougher of a situation, heads up. When the player called in front of me, I think it became a lot easier. Because heads up, now I've got 2 pair and I got an ace-7 low. Is this player really checking their ace-ace-2? Is this player checking their ace-2? I think ace-2, 3, 6 would be really tough because then you have the second nut low with your 2 pair. That's the kind of hand where you almost want the other player in there because it's buffering the potential wrongness of your decision because you actually are that close to potentially having the best hand. Maybe it was like a better 2 pair in ace-6, but then we wouldn't have had ace-2 on the flop. So, but I digress. So with the ace, king, queen, 2 hand that I played a little earlier, this player was short stacked and has been playing super aggressively. So I think in general, what I'm trying to accomplish there is not what you're trying to do all the time in a 6 max 08 game, right? I'm not like trying to shovel money in with ace, king, queen, 2 in that situation. That's fine. You can call here. I think it's fine because Small blind's going to come along. We get to play in position. I think 3-betting be fine, but this player is first raise, and we have this villain behind us here. This hand's going to play fine multi-way. As is, we called and played 4 ways with the button, so I think this is fine. Oh, so my point again with the ace, king, queen, 2 hand. Wow, everyone just wants to fold. Getting 9-1 in position against this villain. Ace is just good, right? Is this pot too big to fold? I have backdoor flush draw, backdoor low. Probably like just right on calling. And if this villain's range is strong at all, and they did lead into 4 people, and they, are a thinking human being. I don't know. What are the odds that both players fold in front of you? I don't know. Not very good. Especially when this player who hasn't played a pot, I'm sorry, a player whose first raise is coming from under the gun. So in that hand, because this player was short stacked and seemingly trying to like shovel money in, I just wanted to make sure that player 5 put a bet in on every street, because player 5 seemed the most likely to me to have a hand that was going to call 2 streets and then fold the river. All right, the flop, if you recall, was 7-3-4 rainbow. And player 5 is definitely going to be calling all their 3-5s, 4-5, 7-5, 7-6. All their like pairs that don't quite make a straight stuff. And then just nonsensically going to fold the river sometimes if they don't make a straight. Plus, if this player keeps raising behind them, maybe those 1-pair hands suddenly start folding. And I did think that this player's range was, that basically my king or queen could have been a scoop out essentially in that spot. They happen to have ace, king, king too, but that just was what they happen to have that this time. In general, in that spot, like we're trying to keep the pot smaller and play our naked nut low draw for what it is, a naked nut low draw. That's not a situation where I'm usually looking to shovel money in. I was making an adjustment based on, what I'd seen from these players. Oh, Paladin seat 5 here opens under the gun. We have a premium hand to defend with here in the ace, queen, 2-5 rainbow. I would love to be able to peel this flop, but that's about all we want to do. We don't want to call or raise, even though we have the backdoor nut low. That's the thing, like, you have to look at the size of the pie. Once someone raises, you're just getting such a work. If I called, it would have been 6-1, as opposed to me calling getting closer to 12-1. The other part of that, too, that you have to keep in mind is it affects whether or not these other players are potentially going to be betting again, right? If it goes like bet, call, call, there's a lot more likely that it can go like check, check on the turn, Not much incentive to bloat the pot here against this villain. One of the better turn cards, pretty good board texture. And we just have a hand that's going to be calling 3 streets. I think if we run into a 2 here, it's unfortunate, but this is our villain from before. And another upside to being selective with your bluff catchers is you can beat some of their value range, which we just did right there. Our villain bet kings 3 times, and we were best. I don't want to check raise the turn. Because I'm calling 3 streets against this player a lot. And again, I think they're going to be bluffing down. Is our hand too strong? I mean, to not put any more money in? Like, I can't think of a street where. Like, maybe the turn, but we don't have 2x right now. We have 2x in our range because we're going to be defending plenty of 2x. And the villain has, like, every 2x. It just seems like, and there's a flush draw out there, which they also had. I wouldn't be surprised if we check with the turn that's villain 3-bet that hand. And now, I don't want to be playing that pot. What's nice is this villain is the big blind to my button, and I can play those spicy pots in position with my button opening range rather than my defend your range there. I'll go a couple more orbits here. Hopefully, I know there was some requests for live play videos because the action is a little more fast pace, and we had a couple of lulls here, but that's life in the fast lane. Let me know if you prefer one table or two tables. I know not much happens over here, but that's full ring 08. Sometimes it's boring and slow, and we just get to deal with some complicated multi-way situations. Also, I can do one table without the HUD as well. I know that the HUD can be a little bit much to look at, and I do tend to talk about it quite a bit, but that's poker. Sorry to jump ahead in the action there. We had some sound issues. No one wants to hear a truck beeping for 6 minutes, it felt like. As we go for a couple more orbits, we'll probably go through the blinds here once and around on the left as we wrap up these sessions. Our pal is still there in seat 6. Get a semi-premium opening from under the gun. Little things pre-flop. We see how the 7 is just so much better. Well, I mean, it's better than an 8 in terms of emergency low help type hands. And not only does it make better lows, but it also makes some more straights with the 3. An 8 would make more straights with the jack, of course. So our buddy 3-bets us, and we are going to give this a decent amount of respect. There is a 4-bet behind. We actually flop a gut shot. I would feel a lot better if this was a spade. If this goes bet raise, we can fold. As is, at 15 to 1, we're going to have to peel one here. Right? There's just a ton of money in the middle. This player did not raise. Maybe this player shuts down and it checks through sometimes. Maybe we spike a 9, maybe we spike a 2. As is now that we're like strictly, first off, we're getting 8 to 1 as opposed to the, close to, or 10 to 1 we're getting on the flop. Second off, this turn card just simply did not improve us at all, right? And it went bet call. So there's different things that can happen. Whoa. Getting bored. Just called for the 2-9-3-4. No problem. Possible misclick. Who knows? Easy defense here on the left. It'd be a bit unfortunate if this player suddenly starts slinging in a ton of money pre-flop, and I've got to figure out what this range is enough to be able to fend out of the big blind at a reasonable frequency. As long as I see that it's still like 9-4x and a bunch of that garbage, we'll just play it as if we're heads up against this player and get ready to see some crazy stuff. So this board texture, this player 3-bet us last time and then just folded. I still want to go ahead and check raise here because I think our hand is actually that strong. And we're going to go ahead and pay off a river bet here. I do like that we have ace-5 with our 9. This hand seems great to check call 3 streets on. This villain just keeps having to happen to have ace-2 every time, which is super fine. That's why we're not doing anything silly. We're just playing our game and going from there. Like here, if this player 3-bets, I mean, you probably would maybe some universe consider folding, right? But I'm just going to go ahead and call because I'm out of position against this character. Don't really love 3-betting this hand here because I don't want to necessarily take the lead post-flop. I think this hand's too strong to fold, and we have a player who could potentially calling pretty wide here. I think this just creates some decent post-flop situations for me. I have 2 of the 2s, but none of the hearts. And plus, this player can call a ton. Last time I shoveled money in here with a naked ace-2. First off, I had more outs. That's a bad river, but we're going to go ahead and pay it off. I had more outs like in terms of overpairs, right? Like this 2 is a very bad card. So if this was a king or like a heart or something, wow. Then I would want to be jamming more. In this situation, and if he's going to be opening 6, 8, 8, 10 under the gun, I'm going to be opening 6, 8, 8, 10. Maybe I should consider 3-betting stuff like that. This player, it's only 15 hands. We're going to go ahead and fold the worst possible king, wheel with a suit, right? King, Broadway, wheel. If it was king, queen, it'd be a better one. If it was any better suits, it'd be better. The opportunity to play pots in position against players like this, I think, has to have a lot of value, but I also think it's very easy to overestimate that value. So it's still a 2-4 limit game. It's still ranked incredibly high. We are going to go ahead and put out our auto post. Probably want to turn that off over here as well, as we unfortunately fold. Hopefully, this was informative. It's funny. The real difference between these two games is just the amount of pre-flop awkward situations we can find ourselves in, where I'm like desperately talking myself out of opening way too wide in some kind of situation because I want to play pots with people. As opposed to here, where it's not even really a concern. We're just so limited by the positions, which is great, right? It's just the post-flop skills are the same, and the post-flop mistakes players are making are the same, which almost makes these games somewhat more appealing, right? I personally prefer the short-handed, higher frequency, more mistakes, yada yada, and you get to play heads up, etc. But hopefully these two tables gave you a little bit of a look into the difference in game styles. As we wrap up our session here with one more hand, definitely going to get that full max value from our orbits. And see our pals off in style. So yeah, these games have been running. Bovada hides the full tables, so you kind of have to track if you're looking for the full ring. You have to keep the lobby up for when they pop up, and you can just keep them open. But yeah, we'll fall down to the gun. I really haven't a problem getting action at these stakes for some time now, so the games seem to be good. Hopefully everyone's enjoying the series. Any questions, please feel free to contact me here in the video thread on the forums, or just shoot me a PM. Until next time, this is Chuck for deucescrack.com, and I'll see you on the forums.